Change is something that is constant in life. One thing about entrepreneurship is when you see an opportunity, you should understand that change will come that could potentially support your opportunity. What makes the right time for entrepreneurs to get into a market is mainly around two key things. The change in technology, but also seeing a change in the policy environment that could enable those technologies to take place.
Hi, welcome again to another edition of our podcast. I love stories. I love a great novel and coffee. I love a great movie. But more importantly, I like to listen to great conversations with exciting and interesting people. People who are building, creating, scaling, innovating, inventing, thinkers. And that's what this is about. Helping to capture the spirit of Africa in every conversation. Helping to challenge us to see what is possible. They also have their stories, from their high points to their low points and everything in between. Who is our guest today? A young man, promising and exciting entrepreneur who is also solving major problems in the energy sector, Patrick Egese. Patrick, you're welcome to join us today.
Thank you so much.
Interesting fact, I was on Patrick's podcast maybe a year or 2 years ago. You guys still run the podcast?
No, not anymore, but 2 years ago, I remember.
But that thing was huge because I run into people that will tell me, I saw that podcast. I was like, but why did you guys stop? Are you planning to come back to me?
No, it was...
Shalewa got busy.
Yeah, so a lot of things happens. I think the most interesting thing is that we were moving to a different stage of our lives, right? So obviously there was weddings going on, people moving on, traveling to different locations. We also had my co-host also who kind of moved back to the UK as well. So it was obviously, it was quite challenging because it was just me to kind of do it by myself. But also my business, the energy business, started taking off, which demanded more time for myself as well.
And that's society you have to travel to.
Exactly. But one of the main reasons, we actually achieved the outcome of what we wanted to do. The main reasons for us, because we were new to Nigeria,
Okay.
right? And we wanted to really put ourselves out there to get some network, have some more friends. And look, you're my friend, right? And we're here talking. And I met a bunch of other people through that process. So at the end of the day, we achieved the outcome what we wanted to go, and was a great opportunity. It really exposed a lot of other entrepreneurs in this space as well, and we had fun with it. It was nice fun activity.
The first time you guys gave me these black glasses to wear.
I mean, one of the idea of the show was like everybody has to kind of wear shades, so it made everyone look so cool, and it took the seriousness out of the table.
I'm brilliant, but the title of that podcast is what I want us to start. I just got back.
Yeah, I moved back.
I moved back to Nigeria, and I think, Patrick, we're talking about Africans, not just in Nigeria, from Ghana to even Kenya. The percentage of Africans who have migrated in the last 5 years is huge. One of the worst we've had in recent times. So a lot of people are looking at Nigeria and they're saying, I don't want to be here. I have to run and survive. You had an opportunity to school abroad. You had a life going on there, and you did the opposite. You looked into Nigeria like, guys, it's time to come make a kill. Why did you get back?
It's a very good question, and every day I also ask that question.
Oh my!
Right? So I mean, honestly speaking, it was at the height of COVID.
Oh.
We were in lockdown in the UK, and I said to myself, okay, we saw the numbers going up every day. People were dying of COVID, right?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where you still asking your sanity, okay, but if I was to be caught dead, where would I be caught dead and why?
I want to be closer to home.
Like, I want to be closer to home. I know that Lagos is still going to be open. Everything will be active
around.
And then at least I could also contribute. I also had this dream of one of the major reasons of me choosing the career path I chose was to bring those knowledge back home to influence people. And I was just done with my PhD at the time. I've finished all the level of education I needed to do. I've had all the experience I need to have. And I asked myself the question of, have you actually realized your dream? And your COVID is coming, you're about to die, but you have not realized your dream. So I said to myself, okay, if I know we're going to die of COVID, let me be on my way to achieve my dream while the COVID is coming, right? So
your mom is still there, yeah?
My mom is still there, yeah.
And your dad as well?
No, my dad is Nigerian, in Port Harcourt.
Okay.
So I got on the flight and then came to Nigeria. Also, I was distracted by the lifestyle. But then again,
that happens to you when you say
when you first, and then after the first year, I realized no, we have to really kind of fear it. Well, I was still building on the side, but like every business in Nigeria, it takes a while before you can get the traction, and that patience is what a lot of people don't have. I had that patience. I also had the luxury of having that patience.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that you have to add. You have to be aware of your privilege, right? And then also that allowed me to set up the business, and now we're a very successful business in this space. So
So tell us about that business, because I mean, we've been talking about how Nigeria doesn't even generate enough electricity to power our industrialization, even our domestic consumption today. We've gone into all kinds of policy, whether it was actually privatizing the transmission end from generation to distribution. We've tried everything, whether it's stopping people from distributing IPP, PPP, but you saw that dark hole. And of all the industries, you said, okay, I'll take on power. Why did you take on power, and what have you been able to establish or build with what you're solving with the energy company you're running?
Yeah, so change is something that is constant in life, right? Whatever you see in this room is probably not going to be the same in about 2 years or 3 years. It's always going to be changing, right? And one thing about entrepreneurship is when you see an opportunity, you should understand that change will come that could potentially support your opportunity. And let me give you a clear example. What makes the right time for entrepreneurs to get into a market is mainly around two key things, right? A change in technology, technological change happening, but also seeing a change in the policy environment that could enable those technologies to take place, right? So what I saw, obviously, I spent decades of years in this space in terms of research, working with companies. I've been doing renewable energy systems in the age of 11, even in Nigeria with my dad. Right? They're building solar systems, right?
So his own company is also a solar company.
Yeah, he started a solar company in the 90s, like way before solar was even anything. But he was a pioneer in the space. It was very early. And
Maybe
like
a
I said,
bit ahead of his time.
a little bit ahead of the time. That those components in terms of technology being right and also the policy environment being enabling for that, because it wasn't there. So he wasn't very successful, but he opened my eye to something that could be successful in the future, right? So anyway, long story short, I saw that when I decided to get the move, it wasn't 100% a blind risk. It was also calculated as well. So we saw a lot of changes to the technologies that could solve the problem of energy coming into markets. We also saw the government, Nigerian government, putting stronger policies in place, like privatization of the network, of the electricity network, encourage and embrace subsidies in place that could drive these new innovations coming forward. And when you look at those components, the country might not be great now, but those policies and those technological changes happening would probably potentially make the country much better in the future. So I'd rather position myself in an environment that has very strong growth. And if we look at the growth for the power sector in Nigeria, is huge. I'll give you clear numbers, right? In Africa in general, you have 700 million people that don't have electricity.
700
million people, one of the highest energy access deficits in the whole world.
We're about 1.2 billion.
Exactly.
And so 700, we have even
that's almost 1 in 3.
About 60%. Of our population
have no electricity supply, and that's you cannot solve. You cannot actually grow an economy in that space. Now I will drag it down to Nigeria, where we live, and it's much more practical for us, right? So in Nigeria, it's 85 million people, and we're 200 million.
Interesting,
right? So 85 million people don't have electricity. That's basically almost 1 in 2. Every 2 people that you see, they're gonna go back home to darkness. One of them will go back home to darkness, right? That's unbelievable. There's no way in the world that should be like. We can never compete as an economy with those numbers, right? So it's our major fundamental problem, because when you have electricity, you get innovations. We have studios like this. We have businesses built. We have all these things coming on. But the other major problem is, it's not a way you can just throw your hand and say, let's just solve it. Let's put everything there, right? Affordability is our biggest problem.
Yes.
We can't afford the cost, the real price of power. We can afford it.
So it has to be subsidized on many levels.
Subsidy is good, but it doesn't allow for a fair fight for what's real. So let's give you an example, right? Gas is subsidized, right? And other things are subsidized, but when you're having new technologies which are coming that can solve the problem and are much more environmental friendly.
You can redirect your subsidy somewhere else.
Exactly. Right? So there's a lot of things. So obviously there's still work that the government is doing around that. But what I'm very excited about this space in the future. I reckon that in about 10 years time, you can hear that, right? That's a generator.
Yes.
In about 10 years time, you probably wouldn't hear that anymore.
I believe that too. Because even we did some solar investment and we realized that it wasn't good. We needed more investment in solar to do complete off-grid. And a lot of companies are now having to explore complete off-grid, right? And I think even at home have also had to transition to solar to reduce cost. So everyone is doing that. But again, the cost of this, right, on the stats, you hear that only about, I think 5% of Nigerians earn 200K and above. So we're talking about a population where with a lot of, not a lot of people have the buying power. In your drive to transition the economy to a solar dependent or renewable options, has the adoption of solar been for you?
So this is interesting. Nigeria is split into a couple of customer category and sectors, right? And we have, we look at it in a different way. So you have the urban areas, you have the rural areas. In the urban areas, you have the ultra high net worth individuals, band A, the rich guys, right? And then you have people that are also still trying to make a living. But then it's in the rural areas, there's a bit of different context. Majority are poor, but you have the odd commercial manufacturing activities in the rural areas, right? So it's being able to understand how Nigeria splits is very beneficial. Now, irrespective of any band that you're in, you would always look at it expensive.
Interesting.
Because you're thinking about it as, is an infrastructure play, right? Nobody should have to buy solar energy. Like in the actual assets, you shouldn't have to do that. It should be part of the electricity network and you just pay for your meters.
Really?
But we're now going out there because of the independent mindset that the government has allowed us to build.
So the government is going to lose.
Right? It has then allowed us to create this thing where we have to go and buy the asset itself, which is very expensive, right? But the prices are coming down. There's a lot of interesting innovation. So how do we find things? There's so much things that are coming to play that are exciting. We spend a lot of time on research on this area, and we're building technologies that can make it much more cheap and affordable. Where one of the key ones that we're excited about is called Palm AI, where we actually understand the different patterns of affordability for each of these customers and tailor the prices to affordability, right?
Is the Palm AI live in the market already?
Yeah. We use that for all our off-grid projects. So I'll give you an example. What we call off-grid projects. So there are communities out there in Nigeria, villages that we provide power to, right? They have 24-hour electricity and it's clean and there's no noise, right? Thousands of customers, right? Now, these customers, obviously, they pay as they use their meters for the electricity, right? And some days they can afford electricity, some days they can't afford electricity. So we said to them, instead of you turning off your power because you can't afford it at a certain time, how about we think about ways that we understand those affordability patterns and then introduce better tariffs that could make sure that you're a lower tariff that make sure you can afford the power instead of turning it off, right? So there's all these are all kind of smart systems that we put in place to make this happen. Obviously, it's a long way to go. There's like 85 million people. We're only doing the thousands, a couple of people, right? So a lot of investment.
But how many states are you operating now in Nigeria?
So we are currently in 3 states. So Osun State, Lagos, and Kano.
Okay.
But obviously, there's more people need us in other areas. We can only move as far as our investment can take. So as we're building more capacity, getting more investment.
So how has the fund access to capital been for you? I mean, your journey to fundraise for the energy sector, are investors as open to that?
This is interesting. So, the key thing investors look out is enabling environment, right? The technology is already there. It's not a technology
And it's
problem.
proprietary to you.
We have some proprietary technology, but also technology that open out there that people can get access to.
Okay.
Right? Technology is already there. The skill set is already there. Listen, there's great engineers in Nigeria. There's great engineers in Nigeria. It's not a skill set problem. It's not a technology problem, right? Although you need to build more capacity on the skill sets perspective. Now, the regulatory environment,
Policy.
being enabling, is also very interesting. Now, let me give an example, right? We complain a lot about the tariff that we pay for electricity, and it's becoming a very big conversation now because we've had the band A to band E coming. We've had different things going on. Even with band A, and you probably kill me for this, right? But even with band A, we're not paying the true costs of power.
My estate cannot hear you say this because I saw another email 2 days ago of a review of tariff. So some people are spending as much as 1 million naira every month on consumption. I don't know, maybe some of them use just too many appliances, right? So I really think that it's just I mean, we're not used to paying for this kind of stuff, right? And it doesn't just seem to make sense why you have a band when everybody's a citizen of the country. Why do I have to pay more for everybody else with the same power? But I think what is the way forward? Because you talk about finding ways to drive down tariffs. For your users, have you achieved that already?
Oh yes, we have something what we call dynamic tariffs, and this is specific users who want to kind of take up that activity. And we also work in a space that is that the regulation allows us to be more interested with how users pay for electricity, right? And specifically, we've done the research on why tariffs should not be fixed, why tariff should change depending on the affordability criteria of the user.
And that is economical. Is a policy that is supported across different countries. Is it how you see it?
It's not. That's why. And you know the funniest thing, right? Is a lot of electricity is a very, very difficult topic. It's a very tough topic, and a lot of people look at it differently in different countries. There are some countries that there's only one electricity supplier for the whole of the country, and that company is probably owned by the government, right?
And in Europe, you might find those realities.
Actually, more in Africa, not in Europe. More in Africa. And a lot of the times, the challenge is the government is also the regulator in that space. So you're having it where they can't introduce some of these new ideas and new innovation because they're stuck in an old way, right?
But let's connect something. I think that I also know that we generate. I'm not sure how many megawatts we now do because that number keeps. National grid will fall and get up. Okay, but I do know that almost 60% of what is generated is lost at the point of transmission. So even we're not optimized in our delivery system, and it boils down to leadership, right? From your own perspective, how can we get it right? Because if leadership and the political will is not structured in a way that can you're coming from an economy where you've lived in Britain, you've seen things. I mean, Britain has their own realities. I mean, we're back here in Nigeria where our own realities are avoidable. They're avoidable crisis, right? So you're just sitting down there and grid has fallen. Okay, what's happening now? You go out of the road, no fuel for you that day. Everybody's locked up. You have to buy black market. And yeah, you're buying black market and maybe somebody has put water. Right? So you have a lot of all those other realities, but paint a picture of Africa for us and how we can get this leadership right in such a way that can truly bring out the potential of the continent.
So, most importantly, we really need to think long term.
Okay.
One of the biggest problem, not just in power, but in every industry in Nigeria, is the lack of long-term thinking. All right? It affects us as an individual because we make a lot of decisions based on what could happen tomorrow.
And just a term of presidency. So the way we think about it.
No, it's not even in terms of
the 4-year political circle. Does it really?
It doesn't affect it because
because this is how they see it. That was 2023. We had election.
Yeah.
Right now, 2024, we just started enjoying. Now they're already planning for 2027.
So, yeah.
So next year is going to be disaster. Everybody's running. So we have 2 years to go.
2 years to govern, 2 years to implement.
No, another 3 years to campaign.
Oh yeah, 2 years to campaign. Yeah, I get your point.
Still and stuff money. So I really think this short-term thinking of the African leader or the African mind, it's everywhere. We're not planting trees for the next generation.
We're not doing that. That's our biggest problem. I think if I was to even restart a podcast, I'll call the podcast short-term thinking, and I'll put a cancel in it. Because that's the major, every problem you see in Nigeria right now is because of short-term thinking. I'll give you clear examples, right? And I'll drive it to the sector that I know more well the most, right? When you invest in infrastructure, right? Investment in infrastructure, power, roads, all these activities, you need long-term capital. You don't need to kind of try and get your return back in 1 week. When you want to get your return back in 1 month, you use substandard quality systems. Those things now start breaking after a year, and that whole investment goes in the bin. Then we start another campaign again, right? Same thing with how we kind of use our cars. Same thing with generators, right? When people go, this is a used generator, it's 200k. This is a new generator, it's 250k. Because you're so used to short-term thinking, you go, I'll go with the 200k. You might have the 50k extra in your pocket.
Yeah.
You might have it. You might not have it.
You pay more in the long term.
Or you pay more in the long term, right? So the short-term thinking affects everything that we do in our life. So that's the same thing we're facing in our industry. There's no long-term capital in the sector, or very few. All the distribution companies that are operating in Nigeria right now are in heavy debt. They can't invest in new assets in the infrastructure. They can't improve the network. So you need a whole different playbook of operation. You need to be more smarter. You need to use advanced technologies. You
have to find cost-effective
ways. You need to also look for long-term capital. Capital that is going to expect a return in 5 years, in 10 years. Patient capital, right? So I know it's not difficult. It's not. Look, you go and ask the bank right now to ask for money. Get the interest rates you're gonna get. High double digit.
Yeah, I think we're getting there to 36, 37%.
Right? That's not patient capital. That's a killer capital.
It's killer capital.
Exactly. So you need low capital to kind of get this asset up and running, and then when you have the traction, then you can start improving the network. So right now, the reason why you don't have a 24-hour electricity is purely because it's hard to invest in network. And it's hard to invest in network because the tariffs are not true. They're still too low.
They're regulated.
They're still too low. The investors can't get enough. They can't get.
And nobody wants to lose that election because if you make people pay what they're meant to pay, it's going to be there'll be retribution.
Yes. Exactly.
That's crazy. That's super crazy. But just even thinking about this entire power game, as an entrepreneur, there are many other realities we grapple with. You're trying to figure out how to run a company. You have to figure out how to hire. But what has been your major challenge as an entrepreneur? In terms of talent, you mentioned that we have great engineers, but some entrepreneurs will tell you it's been a nightmare finding talent, right? So in a sense, running a company in 21st century Lagos comes with its own kettle of realities.
I would disagree.
Okay.
How you structure a company is important.
Good.
One of our biggest successes as a company in PAM is how we're structured. We're structured and optimized to have the least level of staff and the greatest impact.
So you least level of staff
Strength.
So in a sense, are you underemployed? I don't know what the word would be now, but maybe understaffed?
Not understaffed.
Optimally staffed,
not understaffed. I think I prefer the word optimally staffed. Now, that means you have to automate a lot.
It's a lean model.
You have to work on a lean model. You have to automate a lot. The previous way of structuring a company doesn't work in this century because you know why? We have a new daddy in town, and the new daddy is technology.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the structure that they put in past was at the absence of technology.
So are you AI adopted? Like, are you using a lot of AI to transform or reduce your burn rates? How much of AI have you embraced with respect to?
I think in every individual or department in the company is heavily reliant on AI.
Do you feel bad that people are losing jobs and AI is doing it for you?
No, because you have to create more jobs.
Okay.
We create jobs by the work that we do. If more people get electricity, there's more jobs created. So we look at it from the impact perspective. Or internally,
operational,
you have to be more efficient. You also don't have much money to play around with. Right? You're dealing in an environment where there's no patient capital.
So what part of what departments in your company do you think you fully optimize in terms of HR, finance, administrative? Which of them have the AI really helped you to navigate?
So artificial intelligence it's a double-edged sword, right? It could be a gift and it could be a curse.
Really?
Right? And you need to be aware of that and aware of the limitations of that, right? So when we're applying AI, it's not really to replace the individual, but to improve the individual's talent.
Okay.
Right? So there's a fundamental level of thinking that the individual has to have, right? And then obviously you use artificial intelligence to improve those level of thinking. And I think is one of the biggest equalizers, and Africa should embrace that, because the only difference that the West had in terms of
access to data,
intelligence, it's now becoming, and that be democratized. That be probably what I would say. Yeah. And now, Tunde, in the middle of the forest with his laptop and computer, can access the same level of intelligence as a PhD from Stanford University. I think that we're in the greatest change of humankind.
No, we've always celebrated our ability to adopt, but let's talk about our production side. So for instance, we see China being able to catch up with technology and compete with the West, invest tremendously, and in fact, we saw what DeepSeek did to us the other day. We woke up and realized for a fraction of the fee Americans were spending on their AI LLM models, they were doing it for far less. But Africa, if we're not playing at the level of the creation of the technology or the consumption, are we really controlling our destiny, or is still another pawn on another? We're just moving from someone's chessboard to end up as a pawn on another person's chessboard.
You know, I really love that question you asked, and the reason why is because it's always been on my mind. And it's actually a very sad reality that we're not producers, or we're not mass producers, and we're mass consumers. The world looks at Africa as a big mouth open, waiting for things to be falling in. We're just consumers. Majority of our activities are imported. We haven't invested in a lot of infrastructure and capacity to build. We're trying, but we're also still being stifled. We're like light years behind in terms of production. And I even tried going into manufacturing, right?
Well, that's a nightmare if you don't do it right though.
And it was a nightmare, right? It was a very painful activity, but I learned a lot. And I learned that.
Or do you have your raw materials, or you have to import from China too? Because most people who call manufacturing are just assembly and technology. So was yours pure manufacturing or more assembly?
No, so we do. So manufacturing is also in different contexts. A lot of times, you need to have a certain level of imported activities involved, even with machinery, even if it's some part of the value chain, it will be imported in. But you want to start from a point where you minimize your imports, right? That's kind of, and then until you get to zero import, then hopefully that's full scale manufacturing. It's very hard for you to see any product
as end to end,
fully integrated, locally sourced, right? So, and I really, my goal really would be to see a lot more products be end to end, but it's very tough, right? Very less free capital goes there. Need patient capital, which I talked about earlier on. The mindset of Nigeria having short-term thinking doesn't allow us to develop capacity for manufacturing. So, but we are doing it. There are entrepreneurs out there. Some part of my business is still in manufacturing, right? That are saying, you know what? Even if it's going to cost us right? We're still going to pull our head in here.
So I know some very hard guys who are pulling this whole thing. But here is the thing. In most parts of China, you have industrial parks. You have free trade zones where you're guaranteed power supply. You're guaranteed tax incentives. Do you think that for manufacturing, our industrial parks, I know we've had several announcements of industrial parks here and there, but it looks like new government comes, everybody a new playbook. But do you think this will help to drive, if we get it right, will help to drive that industrialization as it were?
So, following those playbooks, these are those basic business playbooks, and enabling an environment that hopefully makes things work. But it also needs to be the zeal of the entrepreneurs to do this stuff. It needs to be the financing that comes with that stuff, right? It needs to be encouraging activity. But another thing I was going to say, which I think is probably much more interesting, and for other entrepreneurs who are out there looking into manufacturing, and really ask yourself this question: who are you manufacturing for? Right? You need to ask yourself that question, because understanding who you're manufacturing for can also determine if you're going to be sustainable. Right? Right now, I would not manufacture for you or anybody else. I would manufacture for the international markets.
So you can compete with pricing?
You might not be able to compete with pricing, but there's other things that you can compete with. You can compete with impact. You can compete with sustainability. You might be able to compete with technology, depending on what you have as an intellectual property. Right? So I would definitely say, if anybody's going to manufacture it, a lot of people do manufacture locally, and there's a huge market for that. But to kind of, if you're looking at it as a first perspective, manufacture for the international market. Why are we not literally making, let's say, chairs, and it's all for exports? All for exports, right? Spend enough time looking for customers out of the country, right? When we think about manufacturing, we always think about, let's manufacture what we need. But how much is your GDP compared to the global world? Nigeria's GDP from last time I checked, and it's gone down from 2021, which was like 500 billion. It's now about 340 billion, right?
Yeah, I think it's the 300s.
Yeah, right? So the global markets, I mean, the UK is about 2 trillion. Europe in general is close to 8 to 9 trillion, right? America is like huge.
It's a local government in DC.
Exactly. That's a local government in DC. Is already meeting your country GDP.
So our market is really small.
So when you really think about it, right, this is why a lot of investment don't go into Africa, because we are blinded by the thought that we actually think that we are great.
So
in terms of purchasing power.
Maybe it's about the distribution on the other side. So I know that Afrobeat has done the magic because their platforms have allowed for diffusion and distribution. I know that there are a couple of people that would love to buy African tables, African chairs, if it's well designed, standardized, and exported. But I'm just curious as to the value chain. And what is missing in the value chain that has limited our capacity to export. But also the deeper fear is the colonized mind. Most of us have actually always looked at ourselves from the lens of colonialism, where we want to be aided. So, I mean, Donald Trump has cancelled USAID. The French knocked off €1 billion out of the
8 programs.
Yeah, 8 programs. Yeah. Africans are shaking.
Yeah. They should shake.
The whole Abuja CSO, they're all in a frenzy.
Yeah.
Because for many years, they've had to design an entire career and based off of funding. Yeah. And there is even another company, I think Swiss also cut off. So there's this ripple effect of aid, right? And Africans are vulnerable because we've been very aid dependent. And it doesn't look like a lot of people are going to lose jobs, right? So it's really, really a very challenging time. But how do we, in the midst of a continent where you have countries with coal, minerals, everything under the ground that they've never been able to export unless anything. I mean, we come to Nigeria here, we talk about governors of the 36 states. Literally every state has something to give. Okay? Some of them are sitting on oars and they do nothing when they're waiting for allocation. So it's almost like we have the way our federal government allocation comes every month, and they're like, well, allocation is here, and everybody carries on. Nobody's producing, but everybody's depending on that. I think that is also one disease that has not really been dealt with. But I wanted to know if it's something you've seen, and how you, a producer, you've been able to come to a point where you're consistently thinking of solution. But that's not a common perspective, even for those in government. What led you to be this type of guy? Who did this to you in a good way?
No. I understand how you're coming from, and just kind of adding there, everything you just said still goes back to that short-term thinking perspective, right? Because obviously,
short-term is part of that thing.
Yeah, people kind of ask for money and beg for money instead of kind of putting down to learn and grow and build, because they just want to pay for what's tomorrow or what's today. And I understand the country is very tough, and it even makes you even want to think that way. But patience is a virtue. And the other question about kind of how does that affect me, the way I think about business at the moment, is more of saying, look, right, at the end of the day, whatever, there's a sense of individual ego that leads us to do a lot of things. My individual ego leads me to want to create a better environment for people, right? And I grew up in a remote, I never grew up in a city, right? I went from a village in Delta State, right, all the way to the UK. This is my first time in Lagos.
Really?
Yeah, right? So when I came and I saw full-blown civilization, I never left, right? But irrespective, I was taught with very, very good knowledge, even if I wasn't in the city.
The urban centers,
right? But people that I went to school with, and I saw them, and I understood, like, look, we're actually a very poor country. We're deep in poverty. Irrespective of what you see around here, we're in a studio in Lekki as well, which is probably a very urban area compared to the country, right? But this is not the way Nigeria looks. Let's not be deceived. You should travel around and you will see we're in dire
Lagos
poverty.
is not Nigeria.
Lagos is not Nigeria. We're in dire poverty, right? So
Lagos is more a bubble.
A bubble, 100%. So knowing that, right, and seeing what's out there, there's so much more we could do. There's so much more we can do. I know personally tell you that I do love your leadership style and seeing kind of the impact that you're doing and thinking beyond the scope of things. And I think that these are the type of people that should be more celebrated and effort put into those areas, right? So I'm not a short-term thinker. I could be way bigger than I am right now.
And
but I don't want to, because I know that what's more important is legacy. What's more important is like the next person going, I was raised under this mindset. Ask any employee that comes to work for us. I made them to say, listen, even if I don't work here, whatever I do, I'm going to make sure I impact a lot of people's lives. You can't work in our company without that mindset. There's no way. We will know if you're just there for the money. You have to be thinking, how do I impact people's life? How can I change life? Every single day, there's somebody in the middle of nowhere that never knew we were going to come. And we come to those communities and they have electricity and they're like, they don't even know us.
I should even link you up to Slum to School. So I went with Slum to School in December. We went to this coastal region in Ekpe. We went by boat to this settlement. Like, it was about an hour drive. They've never had light.
There's a lot of people like that.
Yeah, they've never had light. Like, they're about 1,000 people living in that settlement. No light. Slum to School is building the first school there. And the challenge is teachers. The teachers don't want to go that far. One of the ladies were trying to get her to work there. She was complaining that she has a 14-year-old kid and she can't take him out of civilization. Right? So building the school is one thing. We're trying to even beg coppers. Right?
They even go there.
But there's no network coverage. So
network coverage.
They're worried that they don't have network coverage. They'll be out of civilization. So you some places you have to build a bridge to build a road. And some places you have to literally build a school, but that's not what it doesn't stop there. You have to figure out the internet. You have to we're even building teachers' quarters so that they will live in that place, right? And now we're kind of like trying to figure out that Starlink will all work here. How do you get it? How do you get that? But this is Lagos. There are local governments in there's settlements in Ekpe.
In a metro city.
Yes. And just about 2 hours drive from where we're seated right now. So in a lot of ways, I'm wondering if this is the reality of a community that is connected to Lagos. How many communities across the country is removed from development? And I mean, if you go to South region where you have pockets of community, there's so much wealth, so much oil, but still many people there, the education is poor. People are still trapped in not enough good hospitals, right? And all of those things. So it's just really, really unsettling not having this impact mindset, right? Is it possible for an entrepreneur? Because I think that there's always a tension between profit and impact, where a lot of entrepreneurs will be like, okay, no, business is about optimizing revenue, and not about upload. How do you deal with that type of a mindset?
No, it's a huge challenge. And one of the major things that's actually helped us is we're coming at this from a research background. I especially spend my time.
Doctor actually.
Yeah. So I did a PhD in energy systems, right? So I spend my time on a research perspective. So when I came in, I thought it was a technology problem. 4 years ago, when I moved to Nigeria, I thought it was a technology problem. And then I realized that, oh wow, it's an affordability problem. Right? We are very so we actually created a case. We took a community. Right now, there's 2 communities in Osun State and Kano State right now. But the most important one is the one in Osun State. We looked at the community, right? They have bad electricity supply. They don't have a good education. It's just like how you describe that community, right? And we drew a circle around that community on the map, and we said, in this circle, we're gonna go and put the most advanced technologies around the world in this community. It took us, we're still building it now. 4 years, we've already done about 350 people.
Okay, who's paying for them?
Who's paying for this? We're paying for it, but we're paying for this through our own revenues that we make in the urban areas, taking the risk and providing that to the rural areas. So we supply solar systems for people in the urban areas. They have the money to pay for it.
Yes.
We use some of that profit and
you choose communities and you set up there to provide
power to them,
and they're not able to pay, but they have power.
No, they can pay. They can. This is
it's micro payments, so
it's very small. They can't actually afford it.
I see what you mean now when you say stuff like the tariffs have to be very dynamic.
Exactly,
because there are different buying powers.
They're different buying powers.
You literally give them light and almost a giveaway.
Yeah, in sometimes, right? But there's another thing is when you give people lights, what do they do with the lights?
You unlock the possibilities. I mean,
you will be surprised. You think it's that simple. It's not that simple. Let me give you an example. When we give lights, the first time we give electricity to some people, guess what they used the electricity to do? They went to go and get a TV and they were watching Big Brother.
Oh.
That's the truth. They never thought about, wait, I could do this business. I could do that business. No. It's just, we're just going to live life. Right? And guess what happens? Then they can't afford the power. Because they
cannot sustain. It's not driving production.
Not driving production.
It's driving entertainment.
So we have a term in the industry called productive use. Right? So we actually have to now go and tell them what business they should start.
Do some ice block.
What they should do. We even had to sometimes we don't even give the light anymore. We have to create the business, and the light comes in the business, and give them that business, and say, look, now you're making money. So
what kind of businesses have you created with the lights?
I'll give you a good example. We have a product line called So Cool.
Yes.
Right? Which is basically a solar powered kiosk that has a refrigerator. Right? And we give it out to people, they rent it, and then they make money and they pay back the rent to use in the boxes, right? But in that,
You bring this, you create this kiosk.
we build it in Nigeria here, manufacturing. We build it in Nigeria here.
To create a kiosk, like how much does it cost you to set up one kiosk?
So it depends on the size, the different sizes, but I think it ranges between like ₦1 million to like ₦4 million, depending on
Not bad at all.
on this. But it's not bad to us, but it's bad to the country, because the average earner can't afford that.
I see. You got married last year, and that part of your life is something that took you a while, and you're there. What has changed between Patrick before and after marriage?
That's a good question. So I've noticed a couple of things that have changed. One of the things is speed, right? Before, when it's just yourself, you're mainly moving at the pace to satisfy yourself. But when you know that it's not just yourself anymore, there's someone that looks up to you, and there's going to be a generation of people that will come from that will look up to you. Your notion of speed changes. You become much more quicker with things. You also become much more intentional with how you spend your time, and your purpose also grows, becomes bigger, right? So that's one thing I noticed. Another thing I noticed is also understanding that taking care of yourself is also a great way to serve your family, right? So you want to be able to kind of extend your life in terms of how long you live. You want to be much more healthier, because it's not, that's when you just don't live for yourself anymore. Because of that reason, you tend to take a lot of things much more important. Take life more importantly.
A bit more intentional.
More intentional, right? But also they say something about marriage. There's who he finds a wife finds a good thing, and obtain favor from the Lord. I never believed that until I got married. It's like an instant change. Right? It's more like as soon as you're married, the favors start coming in, because God knows that
He needs to provide for his daughter.
he needs to provide for it. Right? So the way you think changes, and your mental state aligns more towards God's purpose for you.
I love that. I think that it's clear that you have an alignment that has helped. Now we wrap up with one last question. If there's a question we should have asked you and we didn't, what would that be?
Where do I see Nigeria in 10 years' time?
Let's give that a shot.
So, I recently went to Abidjan, right? And I was just moving around, driving around, seeing things, getting to see things. And obviously, me being biased to my sector, power, I was thinking about the power infrastructure there. And I was so amazed that there was always light and there was no generator noise, right? And I think that's where Nigeria will be in 10 years' time. I think we're not going to hear generator noise in 10 years. I genuinely think. Especially because I'm working in the sector, I'm seeing a lot of things going on, changing, right? I see us being so great in 10 years. We're currently going through our weaning period. I tell people, weaning means a baby breastfeeding on the mother. As soon as you take the baby away and stop breastfeeding the baby, they cry.
The sense of deprivation.
It's all these things going on. But after that period, they tend to fend for themselves. They tend to be able to eat other type of food. They tend to be stronger. Right? We're going through that period right now, and I feel like we're getting to our stage of growth as a country. So it's going to be very tough. Obviously, we're in the deep of it, but in 10 years' time, I don't think you're able to recognize the country.
Patrick's dream is to have a Nigeria where there will be no sound of Jen. But there's a lot here that we need to unpack. First of all, talking about coming back home. Though COVID made this happen, but a deeper dream was there to serve Nigeria. Today, we're looking at a man who is helping to light up the country. From one solar solution, channeling profit from urban areas to expand impact in rural areas. And I think that's such an important story. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we can get fixated on the profit and forget that the profit in itself is only a means to an end. The end is that humans flourish. And light is such a powerful catalyst for development. If you put light in a space, kids can read, education can scale, hospitals can run. We read about avoidable deaths where people die during operation because they took lights. All of those things. And I'm glad we're making that change. And that's what this episode has been for me. Bring it all together to really paint a picture of possibilities. I'm more hopeful that just what Patrick is doing in the in the energy sector, others are doing in different sectors. And this podcast is about finding people with connected mission to bring the continent into a new civilization. Guys, I'll make it a wrap here. Thank you again for being with us. And Patrick, it was a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.